Welcome. There was another $6.2 billion announced in last week's budget to tackle the housing crisis. Is it going to have a meaningful impact on the problems with supply?
Well, I think there are a few issues that are really important when we talk about housing issues. And the first one I think we need to put on the table is that young Australians really shouldn't be the first generation that need to make a choice between having a house and a secure retirement. And it really is a supply issue. It's not a demand issue. And so much of the discussion is focused on raising demand essentially, and we don't believe that would help. In fact, it would probably make it worse. What is needed is changes to the supply of affordable housing. And what's interesting is that investors like HESTA are interested in playing a role, and in fact already making investments in affordable housing. And given the long-term patient capital that we have, it's an outstanding opportunity for us to deliver that long-term return for our members. But there is a role for government, and not just federal government, but also state government, local councils, to ensure that affordable housing is very investable for investors like HESTA.
How has Australia's high level of immigration contributed to the housing supply shortage? And will the government's plan to halve the net overseas migration rate or the opposition's plan to cut permanent migration help?
I think we all acknowledge that the housing issues, the housing crisis is driven by demand. I think the reasons why we have such strong demand for housing in Australia are multifaceted. So I think the government's announcements and changes would go in some ways to address that, absolutely. But I think the far bigger issue that we need to be focused on is raising supply.
Should first home buyers have early access to their superannuation to help them buy a home in line with opposition policy?
We don't believe that first home buyers should be able to access their super for housing.
Why not?
The really important reason is because we've worked very hard in Australia to have a compulsory super system that gives dignity in retirement for Australians. And it isn't fair that young Australians should be the first generation who have to choose between having a house and having that dignity or security in retirement.
You've been addressing retail investors at the Australian Shareholders Association conference, where there's been a focus on how companies should be improving their ESG strategies. How are funds such as HESTA's playing a bigger role in pushing companies to do better?
From HESTA's perspective, we see a very strong interconnectedness between the economy, the environment and society. And if we are going to deliver the best long-term returns for our members, we need to take into account the environmental and social impacts of the investment decisions we make.
HESTA recently voted against Woodside's Climate Transition Action Plan. What reaction did the fund receive from Woodside as a consequence of its opposition?
So through that engagement, we have made our expectations very clear. And I would say really around two things. And first of all, board capability, and in particular, the capability that is needed for the future, for that transition to a low carbon future, low carbon economy. And the second is around credible strategies, and really being clear, we need to see credible strategies that can support that orderly, timely, equitable transition to a low carbon future. So we have been engaging with Woodside for some time on this, and obviously they were very aware of our views and how we would vote at their AGM.
Would HESTA divest its shareholding if Woodside fails to take the action HESTA wants?
We have a strong preference for remaining invested, and the reason for this is we see the opportunity for far greater impact if we are invested, and if we use our voice, if we use that active ownership approach, we believe we can bring about far bigger change than if we divest. So divestment is always an option, but it really is not our preference. Our very strong preference is to find a way to engage with the company, to remain invested, and as I say, to use that active ownership approach, because we feel we can actually have a bigger impact in terms of our members. And really the core of this is the interconnectedness between the economy and environment and society. And the fact that these are system issues. If we divest our members' money and they don't have exposure to carbon-intensive assets, they will still be impacted by the impact on the economy. So we believe a much bigger opportunity for us, and the opportunity for us to deliver better long-term returns, is by remaining invested and using our voice.
Debby Blakey, thank you.
Thank you very much.